Hi everyone! Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. Elara's fingers, nimble and sure, traced the jagged line of a fresh wound on the flank of a young wolf. The air hung thick with the metallic scent of blood and the earthy aroma of the poultice she was brewing. Beneath her touch, the wolf whimpered, its golden eyes wide with pain. "Hush now," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm against the animal's distress. "Almost done, just a little more there." She pressed the herbal paste into the gash, feeling the tremor that ran through the wolf's body as the medicine took hold. Healing was her gift, her purpose, the only part of pack life that truly resonated within her soul. Violence, the endless skirmishes with rival packs and rogue wolves, left her cold. She preferred the quiet sanctuary of her healing hut, the gentle rhythm of life returning under her care. But the peace she craved was fleeting. The Luna ceremony loomed, a suffocating weight on her chest. Tomorrow, she would be bound to Garrick Ironclaw, Alpha of the Silvermoon Pack. The mate bond, a primal force that connected two souls, had chosen them, or, rather, had chosen her for him. Elara had always felt like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot, a healer destined to mend wounds inflicted by the very power she was expected to embrace. She rose, wiping her hands on a linen cloth. The image of Garrick burned into her mind. His imposing figure, the raw power that radiated from him, the possessive glint in his steel-gray eyes, it all felt so foreign. He was everything she wasn't, a warrior, a leader, a force of nature. And she, a quiet healer, was meant to be his Luna, his equal, the anchor to his storm. The setting sun cast long shadows across the forest floor as Elara made her way to Grandmother Willow's dwelling. The ancient woman, her face etched with the wisdom of centuries, sat on a woven mat, her silver hair cascading down her back like a waterfall. The air around her hummed with a gentle energy, a testament to her deep connection to the earth. "Elara," Grandmother Willow greeted her, her voice a low, comforting rumble. "The forest whispers of your unease." Elara knelt before her, the weight of her impending fate pressing down on her. "Grandmother, I don't know if I can do this. Be his Luna, I mean. I don't have his strength, his fire." Grandmother Willow reached out, her wrinkled hand covering Elara's. "Strength takes many forms, child. Yours lies in your compassion, your ability to mend and nurture. Garrick needs that, perhaps more than he realizes. But what if I can't love him?" The words tumbled out, raw and desperate. "What if the bond isn't enough?" A sad smile touched Grandmother Willow's lips. "The bond is a powerful force, Elara, but it is not the only force. Love is a choice, a decision made with the heart and the soul. You must decide if you are willing to choose him, to open yourself to the possibility of love." Elara closed her eyes, the image of Garrick flashing behind her lids. He was a strong, capable alpha, respected and feared by all. But beneath the surface, she sensed a vulnerability, a loneliness that mirrored her own. Perhaps, she thought, there was a chance, a glimmer of hope that they could find common ground, build a life together. A howl echoed through the forest, a deep, resonant sound that sent shivers down Elara's spine. It was Garrick, calling to his pack, asserting his dominance. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that her life was about to change irrevocably. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the air filled with the anticipation of the Luna ceremony. Elara stood before her mirror, staring at her reflection. The dress she wore, a flowing gown of silver and white, felt like a costume, a disguise that hid the true Elara beneath layers of expectation and tradition. A knock on the door startled her. It was Lyra, her childhood friend, her eyes bright with excitement. "Elara, it's time. Everyone's waiting." Elara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. As she stepped out of her dwelling, she was met with a sea of faces, all turned towards her. The Silvermoon Pack, her pack, their eyes filled with hope and expectation. She walked slowly, deliberately, towards the center of the clearing, where Garrick stood, his broad shoulders thrown back, his eyes fixed on her. He was magnificent, a true alpha in his prime. His dark hair was braided with silver threads, his jaw set with determination. But as she drew closer, she saw a flicker of something else in his eyes, a hint of uncertainty that belied his stoic facade. The ceremony began, the ancient words echoing through the clearing. Elara repeated the vows, her voice clear and strong, despite the turmoil within her. As the pack elder prepared to perform the bonding ritual, a sudden commotion erupted at the edge of the clearing. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and lean, his movements fluid and deadly. He was a hunter, his eyes burning with a cold fire, his face set in a grim mask. The scent of iron and blood clung to him, a stark contrast to the floral perfumes Elara had chosen for the ceremony. He was an intruder, an enemy, a threat to everything she held dear. But as their eyes met, something shifted within Elara, a jolt of recognition, a spark of something forbidden. It was as if her soul had recognized its other half, a connection that defied logic and reason. He was the antithesis of Garrick, of everything she thought she wanted. And yet, she couldn't tear her gaze away. Garrick roared, his voice shaking the very ground beneath their feet. "Hunter, you dare trespass on Silvermoon territory?" The hunter's lips curled into a sardonic smile. "I dare anything, Alpha, especially when the prize is so alluring." His eyes flickered to Elara, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. The air crackled with tension, the scent of impending violence thick in the air. The Luna's ceremony was forgotten, the mate bond momentarily suspended as two powerful forces collided. Elara stood frozen, caught between two worlds, two destinies, bound by blood to the Alpha, yet yearning for the freedom that only the hunter could offer. The choice, she knew, was hers, and the consequences would be devastating, no matter what she chose. The Luna ceremony, a forced destiny, the clearing thrummed, a palpable buzz of anticipation electrifying the air. Silvermoon Pack, a shifting tapestry of fur and sinew bathed in the moon's glow, had convened. Unspoken expectations hung heavy, a blend of coniferous tang and earthy musk overlaid with the sharp scent of lupine power. The iron-claw banners, emblazoned with a snarling wolf against a crimson moon, fluttered in the breeze, constant reminders of the authority about to be affirmed. Elara stood fast by Grandmother Willow, the elder's hand offered a grounding pressure. Her healer's robes felt cumbersome, an irritating weight against her skin. Each breath carried a coppery aftertaste. She surveyed the assembly, a mosaic of familiar faces, each one a silent observer, a critical eye. Lysandra Swiftfoot, usually so light-hearted, stood somber near the front. Nearby, Torrin Stonehand, the unwavering traditionalist, stood as straight as an arrow, his gaze riveted on the dais where Alpha Garrick waited. Garrick, just his name sent a tremor of unwanted obligation through her. She saw him now, his broad frame outlined by leather armor, jaw clenched in resolve. He projected the image of a potent alpha, precisely the leader they craved. But when his gaze locked with hers, there was no affection, no tenderness, only a possessive gleam that reduced her to a prize rather than a cherished partner. The Luna ceremony, a ritual as old as their lineage, a bond, a destiny, or so the legends claimed. Grandmother Willow's squeeze was gentle. "Be strong, child. You possess more metal than you realize." Elara forced a smile. "I wish I could feel it." A drumbeat began, a slow primal pulse that vibrated through her very core. It was a summons to the wild, an urging to submit to the ancient forces that shaped their existence. Elara felt a phantom tug, a weak echo of the potent magic that coursed through every werewolf, but it was muted, fragile, suppressed by her own inner turmoil. Garrick descended from the platform, each stride resolute and commanding. He moved through the pack like a predator, his mere presence demanding obeisance, quelling stray whispers. Reaching Elara, he offered no gentle greeting, no comforting word. He simply seized her hand, his grip a vise. "You are radiant, Elara," he rumbled, a low, private growl. It was not a compliment, but a decree. He guided her toward the platform, the drumming escalating, the pack's collective energy laser-focused on them. Their fervent anticipation felt like a tightening noose. Elara felt like a sacrificial lamb. She sought refuge in the moon, a silver coin suspended in the inky sky, its light casting an otherworldly sheen across the clearing. She silently, desperately, begged for guidance, for strength, for any avenue of escape. But the moon offered only cold, impartial light. Garrick raised their joined hands, his voice resonating across the assembled pack. "Silvermoon Pack, I present to you Elara Meadowlight, my chosen Luna." A deafening roar erupted, a chaotic symphony of approval and jubilation. Elara winced, the sound scraping against her raw nerves. She yearned to scream, to flee, to vanish into the dense foliage and never look back. Garrick turned to her, his eyes blazing with a fervor that bordered on obsession. He lifted a hand, tracing the curve of her jaw with his thumb. "You are mine now, Elara, eternally." He lowered his head, his lips ghosting along her neck. An unwelcome heat coursed through her. This was it. The claiming. The culmination of the ritual. The moment her fate would be irrevocably sealed. His teeth grazed her skin, sending a shiver that was laced with fear, but also something else. A flicker of illicit curiosity, a whisper of defiance. He was about to mark her, to bind her with a bite that symbolized their eternal union. "This is wrong," her mind screamed. "This isn't love. This is possession." She squeezed her eyes shut, steeling herself for what was to come. She would endure. She would fulfill her duty. She would embody the Luna the pack expected. But even as she pledged this, a rebellious voice within her whispered a staunch refusal. A voice that craved something more, something authentic, something unfettered. Garrick's grip intensified. The drumming reached a frantic crescendo. The pack held its collective breath. And then, a voice cleaved the air like a lightning strike. "Stop!" The word, sharp and decisive, silenced the drums, petrified the pack. All eyes snapped to the edge of the forest, where a figure was framed by the trees. The hunter. Elara's pulse jolted. She knew him. She felt him. The forbidden spark ignited between them months back flared into life once more. A perilous, undeniable pull. Garrick released her, eyes narrowed, body coiled. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he snarled, his voice a dangerous rumble. The hunter stepped into the clearing, moonlight illuminating his features. He was everything Garrick was not, lithe where Garrick was powerfully built, controlled where Garrick was volatile, untamed where Garrick was domesticated. His eyes, the color of a brewing storm, met Elara's, and for a fleeting moment the world faded away. "I cannot permit this to continue," the hunter stated, his voice deep and carrying, effortlessly reaching every corner of the glade. "This union is unnatural." Garrick balked a harsh, grating laugh. "Unnatural? You dare question the Luna ceremony? You, a hunter, an enemy of our kind?" "I question only what is evident," the hunter retorted, his gaze unwavering. "And I see a woman compelled into a destiny that is not her own." Ilara's breath hitched. He saw her. He truly saw her. Torin's stone hand surged forward, his face twisted in fury. "Kill him! He has defiled our sacred ground." The pack surged, claws extended, teeth bared. The air vibrated with guttural growls and snarls of imminent violence. But the hunter stood unyielding. His eyes remained locked with Ilara's, a silent supplication, a desperate invitation. Garrick raised a hand, silencing the throng. "Stand down. I shall deal with him personally." He turned back to Elara, his eyes a swirling vortex of anger and betrayal. "This is your doing," he hissed. "You have invited this calamity." His stalk toward the hunter, radiating raw power, his intentions clear. He would make an example of him. He would assert his dominance. He would reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. But as Garrick advanced upon the hunter, Elara understood one irrefutable truth. Her life was on the cusp of transformation. She stood at a precipice, torn between obligation and yearning, between loyalty and passion, between the alpha she was bound to and the hunter her soul recognized. And the choice she made would ripple throughout the entire pack, altering their destiny forever. A hunter in the woods, the air reverberated as Garrick's blow landed. A plume of dirt puffed into existence where his fist met the young warrior's jaw, felling him like a felled tree. A wave of discomfort rippled through the observing wolves. Garrick loomed over the downed figure, chest heaving, eyes burning with a pitiless light. "Weakness invites oblivion," he growled, his voice a deep tremor that resonated across the clearing. "Demonstrate strength, or be consumed by it." With a curt gesture, he signaled for the injured wolf to be dragged away, a smear of crimson painting the earth. At the edge of the assembly, Lysandra observed with a melancholic air. She'd witnessed this demonstration of power countless times, each one a stark reminder of the Alpha's dominion and the pack's unwavering allegiance. Elara, however, felt a familiar disquiet stir within her. This wasn't a lesson in fortitude, it was a display of iron-fisted rule, of instilled dread. She understood Garrick's conviction that a potent alpha necessitated absolute submission. Yet, something deep within her revolted against the harshness, the cavalier disregard for a packmate's well-being. Turning away, she sought solace in the relative tranquility of the bordering woods, the aroma of pine and moist soil a balm against the coppery stench of blood that saturated the air. There, at the fringe of the trees, she first sensed him. Not saw, but felt. A tingling premonition. A disruption in the very fabric of the forest's energy. An unfamiliar scent, sharp as lightning and smoky as a dying ember, wafted on the breeze. Silently she moved, drawn by an unseen current, her pulse quickening to a frantic drum against her ribs. He stood in a patch of shadow, a figure hewn from the forest's heart. Lanky and lithe, possessing a predator's grace, he projected an aura of quiet intensity that both captivated and disturbed her. He was unlike any wolf she had encountered. His attire was utilitarian dark, supple leather and homespun cloth, designed for concealment and survival. A longbow, crafted from a wood of ebony sheen, was secured across his back, and a quiver of arrows hung at his side. But his gaze was the real draw eyes the color of a brewing storm, imbued with a profound, old sorrow. Several pack members had already detected him, their fur bristling, fangs bared. They circled him warily, their snarls a low, menacing chorus. He remained impassive, offering no acknowledgement. He simply stood, a silent, watchful presence, emanating an almost tangible aura of peril. "Identify yourself," barked a young warrior, his voice betraying his nervousness. "State your purpose, woodsman, or be banished from our territory." The stranger finally moved, his gaze sweeping over the assembled wolves with a chilling indifference. "I am Kael," he stated, his voice a resonant rasp that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. "I have no interest in you." "Then what brings you here?" Another wolf challenged, advancing, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You intrude upon Silvermoon lands." Kael's gaze shifted, looking onto the speaker with unnerving focus. "The wild belongs to no one," he declared, his tone flat, devoid of warmth. "I travel as I wish." The wolves surged forward, their patience exhausted. "You will abide by our laws, stranger," the first warrior snarled. "Or suffer the consequences." With blurring speed, Kael's hands snatched an arrow from his quiver and notched it to his bow. The motion was so fluid, so swift, it bordered on invisible. The wolves froze, their aggression momentarily quelled by the deadly precision of his actions. The arrow was aimed not at them, but at a tree just to their flank. With a muted thrum, the arrow shot forth, burying itself deep within the trunk, rending the wood with a sharp report. "Consider that a preface," Kael said, his voice still devoid of inflection, yet now laced with unmistakable menace. "I court no conflict, but I will not tolerate insolence." Elara watched from the shadows, her pulse a frantic flutter. She had never seen anyone, not even Garrick, command such respect with so little exertion. His very stillness was potent, a peril in his silence more daunting than any mere brawn. Then Garrick arrived, summoned by the disturbance. His arrival was instantly impactful, his commanding presence overshadowing that of his wolves. He scanned the scene with a frigid, analytical gaze, his eyes settling on Kael. "Woodsman," Garrick stated, his voice a low rumble. "You trespass on my domain. You threaten my pack. Justify your presence." Kael turned to face Garrick, his expression an enigma. "I have," he said, his voice unwavering. "I am merely traversing." "Traversing?" Garrick scoffed, advancing a step. "I find that improbable. Hunters do not simply traverse werewolf territory. They arrive with intent." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "What is your intent, woodsman?" Kael met Garrick's gaze without blinking. "That is my prerogative," he stated. "Not yours." The air crackled with tension, thick enough to taste. Elara felt a curious blend of fear and fascination, drawn to the stranger's defiance, his refusal to be cowed by the Alpha's power. Garrick's hand clenched, his knuckles bone white. You strain my tolerance, woodsman, he snarled. I suggest you consider your coming response. Before Kael could reply, Elara stepped into the light. Garrick, enough, she said, her voice clear and steady. Every eye swung to her, surprise etched on their faces. Elara rarely involved herself in pack affairs, preferring her healing duties. But something about this situation, about this enigmatic figure, compelled her to intervene. He claims passage, she continued, her gaze locked on Garrick. Let him proceed. We have no cause to incite conflict. Garrick hesitated, his eyes probing her. He respected Elara's keen insight and intuition. Openly defying her risked undermining his authority. With a sigh, he yielded. Very well, he conceded, his tone still laced with distrust. But I will observe you closely, woodsman. Any trouble will be met with my full force. He addressed his pack. Let him depart. Reluctantly, the wolves lowered their guard, allowing Kael to pass. He offered no gratitude, no sign of recognition. He simply turned and melted into the dense undergrowth of the forest, leaving behind an unsettling quiet and a lingering scent of ozone and dying embers. Elara watched him vanish, her heart a strange mix of apprehension and yearning. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt their paths were destined to converge again. This hunter was more than just passing through. Stolen moments, the oppressive weight of expectation bore down on Elara, mimicking the dense leaf cover above as she sought refuge in the forest's shadowy depths. The pack hall's raucous celebrations still reverberated within her, a chorus of congratulations for her impending union with Alpha Garrick that felt less like well-wishing and more like an inescapable trap. Each beaming face seemed to forge another link in the chain binding her. She craved release, a sanctuary beyond the suffocating destiny prescribed for her. The earth beneath, still moist from the recent downpour, muffled her footfalls. The sharp fragrance of pine and wet soil offered a stark contrast to the saccharine aroma of honeyed cakes and celebratory mead. Fabricating a need to gather herbs, she'd slipped away undetected. Each falsehood stung, a betrayal of the integrity she valued. She discovered him near the cascade she'd always considered her haven. Kael stood immobile, a somber figure silhouetted against the falling water's shimmering curtain. He appeared sculpted from the very bedrock, an intrinsic part of the rugged landscape. Lost in thought, he hadn't sensed her arrival. Kael, she murmured, her voice swallowed by the fall's thunderous roar. He turned, his expression an enigma in the filtered light. There was no surprise, only a tacit acknowledgement of her presence. It was as if he'd anticipated her, a chilling notion that prickled her skin. Elara, he responded, his voice a deep resonance that vibrated through her. No greeting passed his lips, nor did he beckon her closer. He remained rooted to the spot, waiting. Compelled by an unseen force, she advanced. Unspoken tension crackled in the space between them. She halted a few feet away, close enough to discern the stark lines of his face, the profound intensity blazing in his eyes. I needed to escape, she admitted, the words inadequate even to her own ears. The Alpha celebration? He inquired, a subtle inflection in his tone eluding her grasp. Was it scorn? Sympathy? Everything, she corrected, her gaze unwavering. The pack, the obligations, the bond. He remained silent, his eyes dissecting her. His scrutiny felt palpable, stripping away every layer of pretense and exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. You don't desire it, he stated, his voice toneless. Not a query, but an observation. A stark declaration of the truth she desperately tried to suppress. "I don't even know what I desire," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "I'm supposed to be ecstatic, grateful. I'm destined to be Luna, but it feels like imprisonment," he finished, a flicker of compassion softening his eyes. She nodded, choked by emotion. He understood, somehow. He recognized the truth she had meticulously concealed from everyone, even herself. "He's a worthy alpha," she said, the words ringing hollow. "Strong, protective, and controlling," Kael added, the word hanging heavy. She recoiled, the truth of his assessment stinging like a lash. Garrick's strength was undeniable, but it often manifested as an overbearing protectiveness, an impulse to dominate and control. She'd rationalized it as affection, as a desire to safeguard her, but deep down, she sensed something more sinister. "He's my intended," she said, clinging to the familiar refrain. "It's fate." Kael's lips twisted into a cynical smile. "Fate is a convenient justification for those too timid to forge their own destiny." His words resonated within her, igniting a rebellious ember in the darkness. Was she truly shackled by fate, or merely too afraid to defy the pack's expectations? "What choice is there?" she pleaded, desperation coloring her tone. "Rejecting the bond will weaken the pack. It will be perceived as treason." "And your own fulfillment?" he countered, his gaze unwavering. "Is your life to be sacrificed on the altar of tradition?" She averted her eyes, unable to sustain his piercing stare. The question reverberated in her mind, a painful echo of the sacrifices expected of her. "You despise us, don't you?" she deflected, needing to divert the conversation from the perilous path it was treading. "Werewolves. You hunt us. You kill us." His expression hardened, the fleeting spark of empathy vanishing behind a wall of ice. "I hunt those who warrant it, those who victimize the innocent, those who abuse power." "And you believe that applies to us all?" she challenged, her voice gaining volume. "You believe we're all monsters?" "I believe power breeds corruption," he retorted, his voice low and menacing. "And werewolves wield considerable power. But we also safeguard," she countered. "We shield the humans within our territory. We maintain equilibrium. An equilibrium that is frequently weighted in your favor," he countered. "An equilibrium enforced through terror and coercion." She opened her mouth to retort, but the words dissolved in her throat. She knew there was validity in his claims. The pack wasn't always righteous. There were instances of abuse, of unrestrained violence, of the powerful exploiting the vulnerable. "Not all of us are like that," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I'm not like that." He studied her, his gaze probing. She held her breath, willing him to believe her, to perceive the goodness within. "I know," he said at last, his voice softening imperceptibly. "That's why you're here, isn't it?" She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. He perceived her, truly perceived her, in a way no one else ever had. "Why do you hunt us?" she asked, needing to comprehend. "What befell you?" A cloud of pain crossed his features, a glimpse into the torment that haunted his past. He hesitated, as if contemplating whether to unburden himself. "It's irrelevant," he said finally, his voice flat. "It's in the past." "It is relevant to me," she insisted, moving closer. "I want to understand." He regarded her, his eyes filled with a complex swirl of emotions. He saw her vulnerability, her sincere desire to connect. And for the first time, she glimpsed a flicker of vulnerability in him as well, a fissure in the armor he wore so carefully. "My family," he began, his voice raspy, then faltered, unable to proceed. She reached out, her hand hovering tentatively. He flinched, but didn't recoil. She gently touched his arm, her fingers brushing against his skin. "You don't have to tell me," she said softly, "but know that I'm here. If you ever want to talk." He looked down at her hand, his gaze lingering on their point of contact. A spark ignited between them, a silent promise of something more. "Thank you," he whispered. The moment stretched, pregnant with unspoken feelings. The air thrummed with an undeniable attraction, a forbidden magnetism that threatened to shatter the fragile truce they had forged. A distant howl echoed through the trees, a jarring reminder of the world beyond their secluded refuge. "I must leave," she said, regret lacing her voice. He nodded, his gaze still locked on hers. "Be careful, Elara." She turned and fled, the sound of the cascade receding behind her. The forest suddenly felt more sinister, more foreboding. She was running not only from Kael, but from the truth he had awakened within her. The truth that she was not destined to be Alpha Garrick's Luna, that her heart resided elsewhere, with someone else, in a place she wasn't certain she dared to venture. The Alpha's shadow, a glacial draft, snaked through the dining hall, the imposing fireplace a meager defense against the encroaching cold that mirrored the tension between Elara and Garrick. The delicate chime of silver against china punctuated the low hum of the pack's conversations further down the lengthy table. Garrick's scrutiny was a palpable weight. He'd orchestrated her placement beside Hima's silent declaration of ownership for all to witness. "You were gone long today," he rumbled, the timbre of his voice resonating through the polished wood. "Collecting?" Elara found the venison suddenly unpalatable. "Yes, Alpha." Anya needed assistance identifying a rare moon petal. "Its properties are particularly effective against wolfsbane burns." A muscle ticked in Garrick's jaw. "Anya is capable. Do not deplete your strength before the bonding ceremony. You must be at your peak, Elara. For me, for the pack." His words carried a territorial inflection that raised gooseflesh on her arms. Concern was a facade. This was about dominion. He envisioned her as an instrument, a means to solidify his lineage. Meeting his gaze, she sought to project composure. "I am strong, Garrick. My obligations are clear." His hand clamped over hers, a possessive grip that bordered on painful. "Excellent. Remember your place, Elara. Recall to whom you are bound." She manufactured a smile, retreating her hand under the pretense of kneading her goblet. The metallic tang of the wine did little to dispel the compression in her chest. The Alpha's presence was a suffocating shroud. She needed air, an escape. Later, feigning concern for a pack member with a mending fracture, Elara sought refuge in Anya's small, inviting room, redolent with the aroma of dried herbs and beeswax. Anya's face brightened. "Elara, this is a delightful surprise. Are you all right? You seem troubled." Elara sank onto the bed. "I need to confide in someone. Garrick, he is growing increasingly demanding, increasingly controlling." Anya set aside her sketchpad, her brow furrowing. "He's anxious about the bonding, Elara, a watershed moment for everyone." "It transcends that, Anya. He doesn't truly see me. He sees a Luna, a vessel for offspring. My desires are irrelevant." Elara confessed, her voice a bare thread, and, "I suspect I'm beginning to yearn for something new." "Someone else?" Anya's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Someone else?" "Elara, You are pledged to Garrick. I understand. I understand. It's Kael. I struggle to articulate it, Anya. Being near him is like experiencing the world anew. He challenges my convictions, forcing me to question everything. His gaze, it feels like he truly sees me. Not merely the healer, not the future Luna, but May. Anya grasped Elara's hands. Elara, tread carefully. Kael is perilous. He is a hunter. He harbors animosity towards our kind. I realize he hunts werewolves, Elara countered, her voice tinged with desperation. But he's not devoid of compassion, Anya. There's an ache in his eyes, a source for his hatred. I believe he's capable of understanding, of shifting his views. Anya shook her head, concern etched on her features. You are playing a dangerous game, Elara. Garrick would never forgive such treachery. It would shatter the pack. I know, Elara whispered, the weight of her secret a tangible burden. But my emotions are beyond my control, and I can no longer live a lie. That evening, the training grounds pulsed with suppressed tension as Elara observed Garrick sparring with one of his warriors. The air thrummed with barely leashed ferocity. Garrick's movements were brutally efficient, his strikes carrying raw power. A display, meticulously crafted, for her benefit. Garrick approached, his chest rising and falling heavily, his gaze intense. You seem preoccupied, Elara. What troubles your thoughts? Pack matters, Alpha. The usual concerns, she parried, avoiding his searching eyes. Garrick emitted a low, humorless chuckle. Do not dissemble, Elara. I detect your unease, your dread. He paused, his gaze sweeping the training grounds. I observed you conversing with the hunter again today, within the forest. What transpired? Elara's pulse quickened. We encountered each other by chance. I was foraging for herbs. Garrick closed the distance between them. He poses a grave threat, Elara. A danger to our pack. To you. He has taken no overt action, Elara countered, her voice barely steady. Not as of yet, Garrick conceded, his eyes narrowing to slits. But I will not permit him to taint your mind. He is a noxious weed, and it must be ripped out before it smothers our garden. He lowered his voice to a whisper. He will soon learn that some things are off limits. Some things belong to me. His words were a thinly veiled threat, directed not only at Kael, but at her. A raw assertion of his dominance. A chill, born of premonition, ran down her spine. Garrick's possessiveness had morphed into something sinister, something to be feared. Later that night, sleep remained elusive. She thrashed beneath the covers, Garrick's words ringing in her ears. The Alpha's shadow was sprawling and ominous, threatening to engulf everything she cherished. The moon, a fragile crescent in the midnight sky, offered scant solace. She was ensnared in a web of destiny and forbidden longing, and the strands were constricting. She could not deny her bond to Garrick. She could not extinguish her feelings for Kael. And now, with Garrick's overt hostility, time was running out. The reckoning was imminent, and it would shatter her regardless of her choice. Whispers of the past, the aroma of aged wood and crushed herbs, clung to Grandmother Willow's dwelling, a welcome anodyne to the tempest raging within Elara's heart. Weak sunlight pierced the stained glass windows, their panes alive with depictions of archaic pack symbols, revealing swirling dust motes in the air. Elara knelt on a hassock before the fireplace, its sputtering a discordant accompaniment to the heavy quiet between them. He frightens me, Grandmother. She finally breathed, the words a tattered admission. Garrick, the way he assesses me, as though I were property. He speaks of our bond as a bludgeon, something to brandish against adversaries. Willow's face, a landscape sculpted by decades of experience, betrayed nothing. Her hands, knotted and robust, rested on her lap, fingers interlocked like the intertwined tendrils of a venerable vine. A commanding alpha requires a formidable Luna, Elara. The bond isn't meant to be a gentle reassurance. It's a crucible, forged to mold you both into leaders. But what if I crave a different fate? Elara's tone sharpened, a glint of rebellion sparking in her placid eyes. What if I yearn for something more? Willow exhaled, a sound akin to wind sighing through a copse of autumnal trees. The heart proves a treacherous guide, my dear, particularly for those burdened by authority. Allegiance must prevail. The pack hinges on it. But at what price? Elara countered, rising to pace before the hearth. The warmth offered little solace to the creeping chill in her veins. Must I relinquish my own contentment for the sake of convention? Is there no sanctuary for affection within commitment? Willow observed her, gaze unwavering. Love manifests in myriad forms, Elara. At times, it's an all-consuming conflagration, obliterating everything in its path. Yet, equally potent, it can smolder as a slow-burning ember, proffering warmth and comfort amidst the bleakest nights. The wildfire captivates, yet the ember sustains. Elara halted, her eyes searching her grandmother's countenance. Have you, yourself, felt this conflict, grandmother? Pulled between expectation and desire? A shadow flickered across Willow's features, a fleeting echo of a past unknown to Elara. There existed a time, she murmured, her voice tinged with wistful regret, when I imagined possessing it all. Duty entwined with yearning, the pack coexisting with personal fulfillment. I was young, naive, believing my affection powerful enough to surmount every challenge. She paused, her gaze drifting towards the shifting flames. He was not of our lineage, Elara, a healer, akin to myself, yet human. His hands held a potency eclipsing even the most adept werewolf's restorative touch. We convened in secret, sharing stolen moments beneath the moon's watchful gaze. His laughter resonated like music. His touch felt like sunlight after an interminable winter. Elara sank back onto the cushion, her breath caught in her throat. She had never envisioned her grandmother susceptible to such fervor, such defiance. What transpired? She whispered. Willow's face hardened, the softness giving way to grim resolution. We were exposed. The pack proved merciless. Accusations of treachery were leveled. My family endured disgrace. He suffered banishment, compelled to depart and never return. I opted for duty. I chose the pack, and I've borne the consequences ever since. Did you ever lament it? Elara questioned, her voice barely audible. Willow reached out, clasping Elara's hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Regret proves a futile emotion, child. It cannot reshape the past, only contaminate the present. I made my determination, and I lived with it. But I cannot dissemble, Elara. The scar upon my heart lingers. She squeezed Elara's hand. You confront a similar dilemma, Elara. But yours is far more treacherous. Garrick transcends the status of any ordinary wolf. He reigns as Alpha. To defy him equates to defying the pack itself. It risks all you cherish. But what of Kael? The name tumbled from Elara's lips before she could restrain it, the sound reverberating in the air. Willow's eyes narrowed. The hunter? Would you gamble everything for a hunter? A being sworn to annihilate us. He's different, Elara protested, her voice rising in desperation. He comprehends, he perceives me, not merely as the Luna, but as Elara herself. Comprehension is a perilous illusion, child, Willow cautioned, her voice sharp. Humans are not to be entrusted. Their hearts prove fickle, their allegiances easily swayed. They perceive us as monsters, Elara, and they will perpetually seek our destruction. But, Kael, Elara started, then faltered, unable to articulate the bond she felt, the magnetism that defied all rationality. Willow released her hand and rose, her spine ramrod straight. The path you tread remains your own to choose, Elara, but choose with discernment. The destiny of the pack, perhaps even the destiny of us all, may hinge upon it. Remember, love, though potent, harbors the capacity to be the most devastating weakness, and in the grip of our adversaries, it could shatter us all. She turned, walking toward the rear of the cottage, her silhouette outlined against the fading light. Garrick anticipates your arrival shortly. Do not delay him. He possesses scant patience. Elara remained kneeling before the hearth, the fire now a mocking echo of the ardor that burned within her. She found herself trapped between two realities, two destinies, two loves. And the selection she made would dictate not only her fate, but the fate of all she held sacred. Whispers of the past echoed in her awareness, a chorus of warnings and lamentations. The avenue ahead stood veiled in shadow, and Elara knew, with chilling conviction, that the tempest had only just begun. A hunter's heartache damp earth clung to the soles of Elara's boots as she ventured into the woods. A sharp tang of pine and loam replaced the sterile confines of the pack house, yet she knew she risked censure, disregarding Willow's counsel. Still, an unshakable compulsion drew her onward, a yearning to decipher the enigma of the man who occupied her every waking thought. She discovered him near Whispering Falls, his stoic figure outlined against the turbulent cascade. Kael stood absorbed, his attention riveted on the plunging currents, a palpable aura of desolation surrounding him like a shroud. Unacknowledged, Elara hesitated, the impulse to retreat strong. However, the words clamoring for release, the questions tearing at her conscience, anchored her to the spot. "Kael," she began, her voice a fragile thread against the water's thunderous roar. Slowly he pivoted, his dark, piercing gaze finding hers. The space between them thrummed with unspoken tension. "Why?" she pressed, the single syllable pregnant with her bewilderment and dread. "Why harbor such animosity toward us?" He offered no immediate reply, turning back to the watery spectacle, his jaw rigid. At last he spoke, his voice a deep resonance that vibrated through the very ground. "Hate is a facile term for a wound that runs deep, healer. A pain beyond your grasp." He paused, inhaling a ragged breath. "You perceive us as brutes, driven only by instinct. Do you ever consider what shapes the brute?" Elara moved closer, captivated by the rawness of his emotion. "I want to comprehend," she stated softly. "Tell me." He wavered, locked in internal conflict. Then, with a sigh that seemed to echo lifetimes, he began his tale. The story that emerged was a grim tapestry of horror and bereavement, interwoven with threads of cruelty and injustice. He described a quaint village, nestled securely within the forest's embrace, where humans and nature coexisted harmoniously. His family, his mother, a weaver of intricate tapestries, his father, a builder of sturdy homes, had enjoyed a life of simple contentment. Until the night the full moon held sway. They arrived unheralded, Kael recounted, his voice devoid of inflection, as if reciting a memorized script. A pack, not unlike your own, but different. More feral. They descended upon the village, a ravenous onslaught upon defenseless innocence. He closed his eyes, the ghost of agony etched upon his features. My mother, she sought to conceal me. She thrust me into a root cellar, commanding silence, irrespective of the sounds above. I heard everything. The ensuing silence was profound. Elara could picture the terror, the shrieks, the metallic tang of blood saturating the air. Instinctively she reached out, touching his forearm. He recoiled, as if branded. They ravaged the village, leaving nothing untouched. He continued, his voice a mere breath. Homes were consumed by flames. People were brutally slain. My father, he attempted resistance. He was eviscerated. He swallowed hard, battling the tide of emotion. My mother, they abducted her. I discovered her remains the following dawn. Shattered, lifeless. Elara's heart ached with empathy. She had witnessed the devastation left in the wake of werewolf attacks, the utter ruin they wrought. Yet, hearing it from the perspective of a survivor, grasping the immensity of his suffering, was almost unbearable. I'm profoundly sorry, Kael, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. He shook his head, his eyes hardening to chips of obsidian. Apologies offer no solace, healer. Regret cannot resurrect the departed. He severed the connection, retreating towards the relentless falls. For years I have lived haunted by guilt, the guilt of surviving when they perished, the guilt of my inability to shield them. I swore then, upon their hallowed graves, that I would dedicate my existence to hunting down each and every one of their kind, to exacting retribution for their heinous deeds. Understanding dawned on Elara with searing clarity. His animosity was not rooted in mere prejudice, but in a profound, inconsolable anguish. He was not merely a hunter. He was a son, a brother, a man bereft of everything he held dear. She glimpsed the boy within, the frightened child cowering in the root cellar, and her heart twisted with renewed pain. But not all werewolves embody such depravity, she countered, her voice imploring. My Pack, we safeguard humans. We strive for peaceful coexistence. He scoffed, the sound laced with bitterness. Peace? Is that your definition? Lurking in the shadows, preying upon the vulnerable when you deem yourselves unobserved? I have witnessed your potential for brutality, healer. I have observed the darkness that festers beneath your veneer. You have seen the darkness manifested by a select few, Elara retorted. But you cannot condemn an entire race based on the transgressions of a handful of renegades. Just as I cannot condemn all humans based on the actions of those who hunt us fueled by fear and ignorance. He scrutinized her, his expression inscrutable. You believe you possess the capacity to alter my perspective? He challenged, his voice dripping with skepticism. You believe you can persuade me of your inherent goodness, that you are somehow distinct from the monsters who annihilated my world? Elara inhaled deeply, fortifying herself. I cannot definitively answer that, she conceded. However, I maintain faith in the inherent goodness residing within every being, even those shrouded in deepest darkness. And I firmly believe that animosity propagates only further animosity. Violence inevitably begets further violence. Should we persist upon this destructive path, we shall all be irrevocably consumed. She advanced towards him once more, her gaze searching his with unwavering intensity. I acknowledge my inability to alleviate your pain, Kael. I accept my inability to restore your family. But I extend an alternative offering. I offer understanding. I offer the opportunity to acknowledge that not all werewolves are inherently malevolent. And perhaps, by some miraculous chance, we can discover a path to sever this cycle of brutality, to forge a bridge uniting our disparate worlds. He regarded her, his eyes reflecting a maelstrom of agony, rage, and a flicker of something unexpected, an ember of hope. For the first time, Elara discerned a hint of vulnerability piercing his hardened facade. He remained guarded, still wary, yet the formidable wall he had erected around himself appeared to have crumbled, even if only fractionally. "The resolution is not so easily attained, healer," he responded, his voice possessing a newfound gentleness. "You cannot fully comprehend the magnitude of your proposition." "Perhaps not," Elara conceded. "But I remain willing to embark upon the endeavor. Do you share that willingness?" He offered no verbal response. He merely pivoted back towards the falls, the churning water mirroring the internal tempest raging within him. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the forest floor. Elara recognized the necessity of her departure before her absence incited undue alarm. "Ponder this, Kael," she murmured softly. "Consider your deepest desires. Revenge, or the possibility of peace?" She turned and departed, leaving him alone to grapple with his inner demons. Yet, as she retreated, she could not dismiss the sensation that she had sown a seed, a fragile seed of optimism, within the barren landscape of his heart. Whether it would flourish remained uncertain. However, she was compelled to maintain faith in its potential. For if there existed no prospect of reconciliation, then there existed no salvation for any of them. Blood on the moon. The air vibrated, taut with expectation. Under the blood moon's lurid glow, Elara's claiming was imminent. The ancient bond had decreed Garrick as her mate. The Silvermoon Pack collectively inhaled, bonfires blazing, stretching distorted figures across the ground. Elara stood at the circle's edge, the woodland scent offering scant comfort to her agitated pulse. Across from her, Garrick radiated raw power, his gaze a possessive flame. Lysandra observed from the periphery, her expression inscrutable, a constant reminder of Elara's former life. A bestial rumble, deep and menacing, ripped through the reverent hush. It wasn't one of their own. A chilling fear, sharp as shattered ice, pierced the festive mood. Then, the screams erupted. Rogues. They'd targeted the bonding, anticipating vulnerability, to launch their assault. Anarchy reigned. Unprepared werewolves shifted clumsily, their enraged howls colliding with the pack's cries of terror. Training snapped Elara into action. Shoving aside her initial panic, her healer's instincts surged. Ignoring the desperate calls of her name, she sprinted towards the wounded, the air rank with the metallic tang of blood and the sharp reek of fear. A youngling, scarcely through his initiation, whimpered, his lead contorted at an impossible angle. Elara knelt, her hands radiating a soft, otherworldly luminescence as she channeled her healing. The pup's cries softened into shallow, grateful breaths. But others needed her. A warrior clutched a gaping wound across his chest. A mother shielded her young, her arm broken and bleeding. Elara moved with tireless resolve, a beacon of serenity amidst the raging conflict. Her magic, typically a source of solace, felt strained, attenuated by the overwhelming need. She felt the drain, vitality seeping from her as she poured it into others. Garrick, A tempest of fur and rage carved a path through the rogue ranks, his bellows echoing through the trees. He was a primal force, defending his territory, his destined mate. Elara watched, a strange ache twisting within her. Was it admiration? Resignation? Or perhaps a whisper of regret? A shadow detached itself from the darkness bordering the trees. Kael. He moved with deadly grace, a phantom in the night, his actions economical and lethal. He wasn't fighting for the pack. Not precisely. He was eradicating an infestation, a disease that dared to defile his land. Yet, his targets were meticulously chosen, eliminating the most dangerous threats, opening avenues for pack warriors. Elara saw him fell a monstrous rogue, its claws slick with blood, poised to ambush Garrick. Their eyes locked for an instant, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. His gaze was intense, unwavering, holding a bizarre mix of contempt and something she couldn't define. Rorik, at the forefront of the assault, was a ravening storm. His hatred for Garrick was a tangible thing, a festering wound that fueled his every action. He seemed to revel in the bedlam, his laughter soaring above the battle. He was fixated on Garrick, and judging by his calculating gaze, Elara as well. As Elara mended another injured wolf, a rogue hurtled towards her, talons extended. She braced for the blow, knowing she was too depleted to defend herself. But the attack never landed. A silver blur, a savage snarl, and the rogue was thrown back, its throat ripped open. Kael stood over the corpse, his face a mask of grimness. He didn't glance at her, didn't offer any sign of recognition. He simply retreated into the shadows, leaving her to question the reality of the encounter. The battle continued its furious dance, the blood moon painting the carnage in an ominous light. Elara persevered, her hands stained crimson, her heart burdened by the weight of conflicting loyalties. She was bound by oath to heal, to protect. But where did her true allegiance lie? To the Alpha she was destined to be bound to, or to the hunter who haunted her thoughts? The first streaks of dawn bled into the sky, signaling the battle's decline. The rogues, routed and broken, vanished into the forest. The Silvermoon Pack had endured, but at a bitter price. The clearing was strewn with bodies, the air thick with the cloying sweetness of death. Garrick stood amidst the desolation, his fur slick with gore, his eyes sweeping the scene. He located Elara, kneeling beside a fallen warrior, her face gaunt and ashen. He strode towards her, his expression closed off. "Elara," he said, his voice gravelly, "are you unharmed?" She looked up, her eyes reflecting a weariness that transcended physical fatigue. I'm all right, Garrick." He reached out, gently framing her face. "Tonight was unexpected, but it has shown me the true measure of your strength. You are the heart of this pack, Elara, my Luna." His words were intended as comfort, to reinforce their connection, but they felt like shackles, binding her to a destiny she no longer embraced. As Garrick spoke, Elara's gaze flickered towards the edge of the trees. She glimpsed a shadowy form fading into the undergrowth. Kael. He was gone, leaving behind only the echo of his presence and the unsettling enigma of his motives. Had he genuinely aided them? Or was his involvement a calculated move in a grander, more sinister scheme? The blood moon had sunk below the horizon, leaving behind a sky awash in the faint glow of dawn. The claiming ceremony was forgotten, eclipsed by the stark reality of their existence. Elara stood there, amidst the blood and the ashes, torn between obligation and yearning, her heart aching for a freedom she feared she might never know. The hunter remained at large, a dangerous temptation lurking in the shadows, and the bond to the Alpha felt heavier than ever. Accusations and suspicion, a miasma of carnage and dread, clung to the clearing, a lingering echo of the night's brutal disruption. The pack shifted restlessly, their chorus of growls and whimpers a constant undercurrent of unease. Beside Garrick, Elara's incomplete claiming mark pulsed, a dull counterpoint to the storm raging within her. The ritual's violent interruption had left her bound to the Alpha, yet frustratingly free. Garrick's raised palm cut through the nervous energy. His gaze, usually a beacon of warmth, was now flinty, his eyes like glacial shards. He surveyed the assembled wolves, his attention snagging on Kael, who stood aloof, his face a cipher. "The assault," Garrick declared, his voice tight with contained fury, "was no accident. It was a calculated strike." A wave of shock swept through the pack. Torrin Stonehand, his second, advanced, his brow furrowed in concern. Calculated, Alpha? By whom? Garrick's gaze bored into Kael. By him. The accusation hung, heavy as a death shroud. Every eye swung towards Kael. The uneasy hum swelled into a furious roar. Disbelief jolted Elara. Could Garrick genuinely suspect Kael of such treachery? Kael remained still, his features an impassive mask. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before he finally broke it, his voice a low, resonant rumble. "That is false." "False?" Garrick's roar ripped through the air as he descended from the makeshift platform. "You conveniently arrive moments before the attack, demonstrate familiarity with the rogue's strategies, and then plead innocence? Do you expect us to swallow such a tale?" "I came to alert you," Kael countered, his voice unwavering despite the hostility. "I sensed their intentions, though I lacked specifics regarding timing or location." "Alert us?" Torrin spat, a glob of saliva landing near Kael's boots. "Or guide them to our doorstep." "Enough." Elara's intervention, placing herself between Alpha and accused, sliced through the escalating tension. Her voice trembled slightly, yet resonated with conviction. "We possess no proof. Accusations alone cannot resurrect the fallen." Garrick turned, his expression softening marginally. "Elara, I appreciate your empathy, but this man embodies danger. He is a hunter, after all. And he also shielded many, including yourself, from harm this night," Elara retorted, locking gazes with Garrick. "Don't let bias cloud your judgment." "Bias?" Garrick's voice gained altitude once more. "They butchered women and children, Elara. They desecrated our claiming ceremony. This is not prejudice, it's survival." "But what if you err?" Elara challenged, her heart hammering in her chest. "What if you condemn an innocent man fueled by animosity?" Murmurs rippled through the pack, a tide of uncertainty. Elara understood the peril of her position, questioning her Alpha's pronouncements before his people. Yet something felt profoundly amiss. Garrick's swift indictment of Kael, his unwavering certitude, it smacked of rehearsal, of predetermination. Kael observed how the unfolding scene, his expression inscrutable. He seemed almost detached, as if witnessing a staged drama rather than living it. "I lack any motive to orchestrate an assault on your pack," Kael addressed the throng. "My purpose lies in eradicating rogues, those who imperil both human and werewolf societies. I stand to gain nothing from this turmoil, except perhaps the chance to cripple us," Torrin snarled, "to leave us vulnerable to outside forces." "Torrin, restrain yourself," Garrick commanded, his gaze remaining locked on Kael. "We shall detain him. Subject him to rigorous questioning. Should he prove innocent, he will be freed. If not, the unspoken threat hung, thick and suffocating." "Detain him?" Elara protested. "Without substantiating evidence? That is unjust." "Justice will prevail, Elara," Garrick assured her, his voice edged with steel. "Trust me on this." He reached, his fingers brushing against her skin, sending a chill down her spine, one devoid of passion. "Come, Elara. You require rest. The night has taken its toll." He guided her away, the pack parting like the Red Sea before them. As they retreated, Elara stole a glance back at Kael. Their eyes met fleetingly, a spark of something indecipherable passing between them. Then he was enveloped by guards, his fate uncertain. Once within the pack house, Garrick faced Elara Kaz, his features softening, pleading. "Elara, I understand your distress, but you must trust me. I am acting in the best interests of our pack." "Are you, Garrick?" Elara's voice was barely audible. "Or are you protecting your own interests?" Garrick frowned, confusion clouding his features. "What do you mean? Why were you so quick to condemn Kael?" Elara probed, her mind racing to catch up. "You barely paused. It was as though you anticipated this." "He is a hunter, Elara." Garrick's voice escalated with frustration. "He is, by nature, our enemy." "But what if he is not?" Elara pressed. "What if he speaks the truth? What if another party orchestrated this assault? Someone seeking to see you, to see us all, reduced to ashes?" Garrick stared, his eyes searching hers for answers. Who else could possibly desire such a thing? Elara hesitated, unable to articulate her suspicions. Not yet. But the seed of doubt had taken root. Something was deeply amiss. The attack, Garrick's immediate reaction. Kael's unexpected arrival all felt like disparate pieces of a puzzle she struggled to assemble. "I do not know," she admitted finally, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "But I intend to discover the truth." Garrick reached for her, his hand grazing her cheek. "Elara, I beg you, don't let this consume you. Allow me to navigate this treacherous path. You need to focus on the claiming. On us." Elara recoiled slightly, evading his touch. "I cannot, Garrick. No, until I unearth the truth." She turned and strode away, leaving Garrick isolated in the dimly illuminated room. The reek of blood and terror still permeated the air, a constant reminder of the unleashed chaos and the secrets obscured beneath the veneer of order. Her allegiance to the pack remained unwavering, yet her unquestioning faith in Garrick was beginning to erode. Secrets in the shadows, a crescent moon. A pale fingernail scratching the night sky, stretched elongated, gaunt shadows across the forest as Elara hurried toward their clandestine rendezvous. The air, thick with the cloying sweetness of pine and loam, Ka, usually a solace, now carried a sharp undercurrent of apprehension. Her cloak, a meager defense of coarse wool, did little to ward off the bone-deep chill, a cold born not of the night, but of trepidation. Kael was already there, a stoic sucker, figure sculpted from darkness, leaning against the gnarled trunk of an ancient oak. Wordless, still as a statue, his very presence thrummed with a restrained power that both frightened and intrigued her. Obsidian shards, reflecting scant moonlight, were his eyes as he watched her approach. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice a fragile thread against the whispering leaves. "I needed to speak with you." Garrick believes I engineered the assault, Kael declared, his voice a deep resonance that stirred the quiet. An assertion, not an inquiry. I don't, Elara countered, her tone unwavering. But I require substantiation. Garrick, he's deaf to reason. Kael pushed off the tree. Reason is a luxury forfeited. Proof is your shield. He closed the distance between them, an aroma of wood smoke and something feral, deeply wild, enveloping her senses. What have you learned? Elara hesitated, burdened by duty and her pack's fate. They weren't mere rogues. Too precise, too disciplined. And they knew the intricacies of our defenses. Garrick's, Kael amended, his gaze intense. He commands the patrols, the wards. Precisely. A knot of disquiet tightening in her gut. He claims they circumvented the outer wards, yet the energy signaturette was dissonant. As if guided, an inside hand weakened the barriers, or knew a secret path. And you suspect Garrick's complicity. Kael's voice was a silken threat. Elara recoiled slightly. I struggled to discern truth. He rushed to judgment, eager to dismiss any other possibility. She met his gaze, seeking solace. I require investigation. But, covertly, he surveils me. Kael appraised her, his face a mask. I possess my own channels. Intelligence regarding the rogues, their pre-attack movements. I'll share what I uncover. Exercise caution, Elara implored. If Garrick discovers your investigation, he will act as he deems necessary, Kael concluded, his jaw hardening. As will you. He melted back into the gloom, a shadow among shadows. Same place, 2 nights hence. Same hour. Elara watched him vanish, a volatile cocktail of hope and trepidation churning within her. She trod a perilous path, one threatening to consume everything she held dear. The following day, Elara leveraged her position as the pack's medic to move freely, ostensibly tending to the wounded from the raid. Her true intent, however, was to glean information, to catch hushed whispers, to note inconsistencies. She started with the warriors who'd patrolled that fateful night. Their recollections spoke of mayhem, of being overwhelmed, the rogues materializing out of thin air, yet their accounts clashed subtly with Garrick's narrative. He declared the rogues unusually potent, almost bestial. The warriors painted a picture of chilling efficiency, bordering on automatum says. The discordance needled her. She visited the skirmish site, purportedly gathering herbs for poultices. As she circumnavigated the perimeter, a peculiarity caught her eye. The earth was churned, not solely from combat, but from the drag of something substantial. A faint trail snaked through the undergrowth. Following it, she arrived at the territory's edge, near the Shadowclaw border. Half concealed beneath decaying leaves lay a discarded piece of armor, emblazoned with the Stonehand clan's emblem. The Stonehand clan, loyal to Garrick, commanded by Torin, his right hand. Elara's pulse hammered. Torin! Implausible. What rationale could compel him to orchestrate an assault on his own kin? She meticulously concealed the armor, camouflaging it with leaves and dirt, etching the location into her memory. She needed comprehension to untangle the coils of deceit tightening around her. That evening, at the communal meal, Elara scrutinized Torin. He sat beside Garrick, his usual gruffness exaggerated. His eyes flitting nervously, he evaded her gaze, a subtle yet damning clue. The rogues displayed a more sophisticated strategy than we anticipated, Garrick proclaimed, his voice resonating through the hall. We must intensify patrols, Fortify the wards. Perhaps further interrogation of Kael is warranted, Torin interjected, his voice dripping with venom. His arrival preceded the attack. Too serendipitous. Elara's fist clenched beneath the table. Kael extended a warning, she countered, her voice strained. He endangered himself to safeguard us. Gratitude is his due, not suspicion. Garrick fixed her with a baleful glare. Elara, desist. Your concern is understood, but my authority shall not be undermined. Elara subsided, her mind ablaze. She craved irrefutable proof to expose the truth, and she knew where to begin. Later, shielded by the knight's velvet cloak, Elara crept towards Torin's dwelling. A high-stakes gamble, punishable by severe consequences if exposed. But no alternative presented itself. The cabin stood dark, silent. She slipped within, senses heightened, seeking any trace of occupation. The air hung heavy with wood smoke, laced with a metallic tang. She unearthed it within a small chest beneath Torin's cot, maps detailing pack defenses, the troll routes, ward vulnerabilities, and a ledger crammed with coded notations, mercenary payments, alliances pledged with rival packs. The truth lay exposed. Torin had plotted this for months, manipulating Garrick, exploiting the chaos to usurp control. But the motive remained elusive. Digging deeper, she found the explanation. Garrick's sire, the former Alpha, had brokered an accord with humans, granting territory access for information. Torin, a staunch traditionalist, vehemently opposed this pact, deeming it a betrayal. He viewed Garrick as pliant, unwilling to uphold ancestral traditions. Torin initiated the assault to destabilize Garrick, showcase his perceived frailty, and seize pack leadership, thereby restoring its former glory. He had employed the rogues as expendable pieces, manipulating them to serve his ambitions. Elara shut the ledger, her hands trembling. The ramifications were staggering. Torin had betrayed his pack, his Alpha, his very people. And he would stop at nothing to safeguard his power. As she pivoted to depart, a sound echoed behind her. A floorboard groaned. She spun, her heart lodging in her throat. Torin filled the doorway, his eyes burning with ire. In his hand, a silver dagger gleamed under the moonlight. "So, you know," he rasped, his voice a dangerous rumble. "I underestimated your curiosity." Challenging the alpha pine needles, and the musk of wet soil clung to Elara's pelt as she moved purposefully through the territory. Torin's threats still stung, yet a fiercer imperative eclipsed them, confronting Garrick. Could the Alpha she was bound to truly be capable of such treachery? His den, a formidable fortress of woven branches and stacked stone, rose before her. Sentries, their gaze reflecting the unwavering devotion an Alpha commanded, guarded the entrance. Recognizing her, the promised Luna, they yielded passage without a word. Inside, Garrick's presence saturated the air. A dominant chord of cedar mingled with a sharper tang, like ozone before a downpour. Once a source of solace, it now felt oppressive. He sat hunched over a table, poring over maps lit by a guttering lamp. He glanced up, his features softening at the sight of her. "Elara, this is a late hour for a visit." She dispensed with civilities. "Torin." His brow creased. "What about him?" Elara advanced, placing her evidence a roughly sketched map mirroring his own, but annotated with ambush coordinates squarely before him. "He's sabotaging you, Garrick, orchestrating attacks to undermine your authority, to shatter your alliance with the humans." Garrick leaned back, his eyes now like chips of flint. "That's a grave accusation, Elara. I possess irrefutable evidence." Her tone remained steady, unwavering. He confessed. He admitted to the whole scheme. A tick pulsed in his jaw. And you believed him? Over me? Over your Alpha? I believe what I witnessed, Garrick, what I overheard. The facts speak for themselves. He rose, his imposing physique looming over her. The space crackled with suppressed hostility, the mate bond groaning beneath the burden of her accusations. Your attachment to Kael is beclouding your judgment. The hunter's name landed like a physical blow. Elara flinched, yet held her ground. This has nothing to do with Kael. It concerns the pack, and your leadership. Torin is a danger, and must be dealt with accordingly. Garrick's voice lowered, sharpening to a dangerous edge. Torin is steadfast. He's been at my side since I seized the Alpha mantle. He would never betray me. A loyalty is not always what it seems, Garrick. It can be twisted to justify heinous acts. Her gaze met his. Unwavering. He's preying on your insecurities, exploiting the pack's aversion to humans. He's manipulating you. He slammed his fist on the table, the impact jarring the lamp and flinging shadows into a frenzied dance. Enough. You overstep, Elara. You are not yet Luna. You hold no right to challenge my decisions. But I will be, she retorted, her voice rising to match his. And as Luna, I am bound to protect this pack, even from you, if the need arises. The following silence was absolute. The air hung thick and charged, heavy with unspoken words and simmering rage. Elara felt the pull of the bond, usually a source of comfort and unity, now a searing brand, a painful reminder of the duty she was being forced to choose between. Garrick retreated a step, his expression inscrutable. You honestly believe I am manipulating the pack, that I would willingly endanger them? I believe that your singular focus on proving yourself, on maintaining absolute control, has blinded you to the truth. The truth? He released a harsh, mirthless laugh. The truth is that humans are a menace. They always have been. My father understood this and kept them in check. I'm simply doing what is necessary to safeguard our kind, by staging attacks, by falsely accusing innocent humans. That's not protection, Garrick. That's inviting war. He seized her arm, his grip biting into her flesh. You misunderstand. You're too idealistic. You view the world in shades of gray, but it's a binary choice, Elara. Them or us. She yanked her arm free, the lingering sting mirroring the deeper ache in her heart. There is always another way, Garrick. There must be. But you refused to seek it. The connection between them throbbed with resentment and disillusionment, the bond unraveling, weakened by each vitriolic exchange. Elara felt a wave of sorrow, a lament for the kinship she had yearned for, the partnership she had envisioned. Yet, beneath the sorrow, a spark of defiance ignited. She would not submit. She would not be silenced. I intend to uncover the truth, Garrick, she asserted, her voice calm but resolute. And should that truth implicate you, I will not hesitate to expose it, even if that means challenging you for the Alpha title. His eyes narrowed, his features hardening into a mask of raw fury. You would defy me, your destined mate? Fate may have forged the bond, Garrick, but I determine its meaning. She moved back, creating space between them. And, at this moment, I choose to defend this pack, even if doing so requires challenging its Alpha. With that, Elara pivoted and left, leaving Garrick isolated in the den. His face a tumultuous mix of conflicting emotions. The scent of ozone, the harbinger of an impending storm, intensified. mirroring the turmoil brewing within the Silvermoon Pack. The gauntlet had been thrown, the battle lines drawn. The Pack's future, and the fate of their Alpha, now dangled precariously in the balance. A debt repaid the air in the forest was thick and expectant, the promise of a downpour clinging to Elara like the earthy scent on her pelt as she shifted. Her departure from the pack house, cloaked in the flimsy pretense of herb gathering, had been met with Garrick's perceptive, calculating gaze. Her true destination was Tauren. She needed answers concerning his treachery, to validate her suspicions before confronting Garrick again. A sharp crack echoed behind her. Elara spun. Every nerve alight. Not Tauren. From the gloom emerged 3 imposing figures, eyes burning with unnatural light, their snarls rumbling like distant thunder. Rogues, yes, but these were not the lost and desperate souls who occasionally wandered into Silvermoon territory. Their movements had purpose, a coordinated menace that hinted at direction. "Looking for someone, Luna?" a voice drawled. Brock, a pack member known more for his simmering resentment of Elara's burgeoning influence than his skill, stepped forward, the other 2 flanking him like loyal hounds. "Garrick sends his greetings." The revelation slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. Garrick, he intended to silence her, using these pawns to do his bidding. A wave of bile rose in her throat. How could she have been so naive, so willing to find the good in him even as darkness festered? "Garrick wouldn't," she began, but the words dissolved, suffocated by the acrid taste of betrayal. Brock's laugh scraped against the silence. "Wouldn't he? Did you think he'd allow you to challenge him? Expose him? You possess too much knowledge, healer." He lunged, claws extended like razors. Instinct ignited, and Elara evaded the attack with lightning speed. She was a healer, not a warrior. But she was also a werewolf, and she would not surrender easily. She retaliated, her fist connecting with Brock's jaw, sending him staggering. But the other 2 descended upon her with brutal swiftness, their combined force overwhelming. They forced her to the ground, the coarse earth biting into her fur. Brock, recovering from the blow, approached, his features twisted into a cruel parody of a smile. "Such a waste," he murmured, raising his claws for the killing stroke. "But orders are orders." Panic constricted her chest. This was it. This was how it would end. Not in some heroic act, not in a fight to defend her pack, but snuffed out in the forest, a casualty of Garrick's ambition, a blur of motion, a primal roar unlike her own, and then pandemonium. Kael. He moved with a savage grace she had never before witnessed, a whirlwind of muscle and unleashed power. One rogue was hurled against a tree with a sickening thud, the other disarmed with terrifying efficiency. Brock hesitated, his arrogance replaced by stark terror. Kael stalked toward him, his eyes burning with a glacial rage. "You dare touch her?" he rumbled, his voice a low, dangerous tremor. Brock, realizing he was hopelessly outmatched, turned tail and vanished into the undergrowth. Kael didn't pursue. His focus was entirely on Elara. He knelt beside her, his expression softening as he gently brushed a stray leaf from her cheek. "Are you injured?" Elara, still shaken by the assault and Kael's sudden intervention, could only manage a nod. His touch, both gentle and reassuring, sent a jolt through her. It lacked the possessive, demanding quality of Garrick's touch, and instead felt like something else. Something that resonated deep within her soul. "Garrick sent them, didn't he?" Kael's words were edged with a controlled fury. She nodded again, tears pricking at her eyes. He was afraid. Kael assisted her to her feet, his grip solid and reassuring. He has reason to be. They stood in silence for a long moment, the only sound the gentle drumming of the rain as it began to fall. Elara looked at Kael, truly saw him, and discovered not the cold, detached hunter, but a man of unwavering loyalty, a man who had risked everything to save her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you come?" He hesitated, his gaze shifting. Eve felt something was amiss. She knew there was more to it than that. Something remained unsaid, a tangible presence that hung between them, as thick as the rain. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life. I am in your debt." He shook his head, his eyes locking with hers. "You owe me nothing, Elara." His voice was rough, almost pleading. "Just be careful." The air thrummed with unspoken desires, with the weight of their impossible connection. Elara recognized, with a certainty that transcended reason, that her feelings for Kael extended far beyond mere gratitude. They were something deeper, something forbidden, something that threatened to shatter every assumption she held about herself and her destiny. "I will," she promised, her voice a fragile whisper. He scrutinized her face for a long moment, then turned and vanished into the trees, leaving her alone in the downpour, burdened by the weight of her choices. The rain intensified, washing away the blood and grime, but it could not erase the truth. Garrick had betrayed her, and Kael had saved her. The bond she had perceived as unbreakable had been shattered, and a perilous new path stretched before her. A path that led directly toward the hunter's heart. A path she suddenly yearned to tread. The debt Kael dismissed was not one of life, but of the soul. And she was now aware, with a growing sense of both trepidation and exhilaration, that she would devote the rest of her days to its repayment. The prophecy unveiled, Elara gasped, the frigid air a cruel contrast to the frantic drumbeat in her chest. Kael's defiance of pack law echoed in her thoughts, a stark rebellion against the order she held sacred. Garrick's treachery throbbed like a poisoned barb, its venom spreading with each breath. Seeking refuge from the turmoil, she instinctively sought Grandmother Willow's haven, the air thick with the comforting aroma of dried botanicals and ageless wisdom. The crone sat by the flickering hearth, her ancient face a roadmap of worry. "A tempest rages within you, Elara," she murmured, her voice a deep, soothing resonance. "Garrick, he unleashed rogues." Elara choked out, each syllable bitter as bile. "He seeks my silence." A sigh escaped Grandmother Willow, heavy with ages of regret. "Power's allure is a viper's kiss, child. A lesson our pack revisits with each turning moon." She nodded towards a time-worn tome resting on a nearby table. "Perhaps answers lie within these hallowed pages." Cautiously, Elara approached. The book was a relic, its leaves fragile and stained with the ghosts of time. The script was a forgotten dialect of their kind, glimpsed only in the most venerable pack archives. "What is this?" "The first moon's visions," Grandmother Willow revealed, "penned by our pack's first seer, across generations." I'd hoped its slumber would remain undisturbed, yet. Destiny has a discordant melody. Elara began to decipher the text, her brow knitting together. The words were cryptic, layered with symbolism and veiled premonitions. Initial passages chronicled bygone eras, conflicts weathered, alliances sealed. Then, her blood turned to ice. When the Alpha's ambition eclipses all else, and a consuming darkness stains the light, a healer and a hunter, unbound by kinship or loyalty, shall emerge. Their joining becomes the key, the axis upon which our fate pivots. Together, salvation or ruin shall reign, birthing an era of unparalleled zenith or absolute obliteration. A tremor ran through Elara as she finished. The words resonated, pregnant with implication. She met Grandmother Willow's gaze, disbelief wide in her eyes. A healer and a hunter? What can it signify? Grandmother Willow's expression was grave. The seer's sight never wavered, Elara. Her prophecies always unfold, although their true form is elusive. But a hunter? It must be Kael, Elara whispered, the revelation landing like a blow. Yet, I am pledged to Garrick. I am to be Luna. To be, Grandmother Willow echoed, a hint of doubt coloring her tone. Or chosen for. The bond holds strength, Elara, but it's not invincible. The vision speaks of a union divorced from blood or pack, a bond forged of something more profound. Elara envisioned the visceral, undeniable pull she felt towards Kael, the exhilarating flutter in her chest at his nearness. It was a connection that defied reason, challenging every tenet of her duty. Could this forbidden attraction be something beyond a mistake, a thread in a larger tapestry, preordained? But if the vision holds truth, if Kael and I are intertwined by fated, it could shatter the pack, Elara countered, fear lacing her voice. He is a hunter, sworn to our destruction. Is he, truly? Grandmother Willow probed, her eyes like shards of flint. Or is he something more complex? Perhaps a hunter awakened to the rot festering within our own ranks, a darkness that seeks to devour us from the inside. Elara fell silent, wrestling with the prophecy's weight and the impossible predicament before her. Bound to Garrick, destined for Luna status, yet her heart yearned for Kael, the hunter who had spared her life and ignited an illicit flame within her. Now, this link was revealed not as simple longing, but as a crucial nexus in the future of her kind. What am I supposed to do? Elara breathed, barely audible. Grandmother Willow covered Elara's hand with her own, her touch firm. Follow your heart's compass, Elara, but navigate with prudence and valor. The path ahead bristles with peril, and your choices will unleash an avalanche of consequences. Elara spent the night immersed in the prophecy, searching for guidance in its cryptic verses. The deeper she delved, the more she felt the immense burden that had been thrust upon her. She was not merely a healer, not just a future Luna, but a pivotal figure in a destiny she never sought. As dawn tinged the sky with rose and gold, Elara emerged from the cottage, her face drawn but resolute. She knew her course. She needed to find Kael, to understand his motives, his allegiances, his very soul. She had to decide, once and for all, whether she could risk everything for a love that could either deliver them all or consign them to darkness. The fate of her pack, perhaps even the world, pressed upon her shoulders. The weight threatened to crush her, but she would not break. She would meet destiny head-on, whatever the toll. Seraphina Whisperwind materialized abruptly, as if conjured from the ether, her eyes glowing with uncanny light. The skein unravels, Elara Meadowlight, she rasped, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. The hunter and the healer, a dance between conflagration and ice. Tread carefully, child, for the path to deliverance is slick with treachery and sacrifice. The moon sheds tears for the choices you must make. Then, with a whisper of displaced air, she vanished, leaving Elara alone in the burgeoning dawn. the prophecies' weight settling like a funereal pall. Imprisoned heart Garrick's command ripped through the training grounds like a jagged tear in the fabric of the afternoon. Seize him! The quiet left in the wake of Elara's encounter with Grandmother Willow vanished. Grim-faced wolves, led by Torrens Stonehand, surged toward Kael. Elara remained transfixed, the prophecy a leaden weight on her shoulders. Kael stood alone, a still point in a storm gathering around him. His dark eyes met hers across the field, a silent, bleak acknowledgement of what was to come. He displayed no fear, only a hard-won acceptance of his role as a piece on a much larger board. "What is the meaning of this, Garrick?" Elara demanded, her voice a strained bell note in the charged air. She willed herself to appear every inch the future Luna, though her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against her throat. Garrick's jaw flexed. "He defied me, Elara. Challenged my rule within my own territory. Such effrontery demands a response." The possessiveness in his tone felt like invisible chains tightening around her. "Defiance or truth?" Elara countered, advancing a step. He voiced what needed saying, things you, as Alpha, should have considered. Torrens' lip curled in a snarl, his gaze laser-focused on Kael. "He's a hunter, Elara. An outsider. He has no place to speak on Pack lands." Kael said nothing, his gaze flickering from Elara to Torrens, a hint of scorn in his eyes. He allowed the pack to engulf him, their grasp bruising as they bound his hands with thick hemp. He offered no resistance, moving with a disconcerting calm, as though submitting not to brute force, but to an ordained fate. Garrick's voice sliced through the rising tension like a shard of ice. "Take him to the oubliette. He will face judgment." He turned to Elara, his eyes flinty. "And you, Elara, prepare. The bonding will proceed. Nothing will impede our progress." Elara stood paralyzed as they hauled Kael away. Their eyes locked for a final instant, a mute exchange of warning and something else, a flicker of forbidden hope that ignited within her soul. Perhaps destiny was not yet immutable. The dungeons breathed damp and shadowed silence. Kael was shoved into a cell, the iron door echoing shut, the sound swallowed by the earth. The fetid air hung thick with mold and despair, the silence punctuated only by the plink of dripping water and the distant ululation of the pack above. He leaned against the frigid stone, his bound wrists chafing. He could easily overpower them. Escape was well within his grasp. But flight was not his objective. He was a hunter, yes, but also a tactician. He knew his imprisonment was a calculated prey. Move by Garrick. A blatant display of dominion meant to cow his followers and silence dissent. To fight now would be to validate the Alpha's scheme. He closed his eyes, focusing on the steady drumbeat of his own heart. He'd faced far worse than a clammy cell and a power-mad Alpha. The ghosts of his past, the specters that haunted his waking hours, were far more terrifying than any physical constraint. He had learned to coexist with them, to harness them as a source of strength, a driving impetus. Above, Elara traversed her chambers like a caged lynx. The fragrance of the wildflowers she'd gathered now seemed sickly, cloying. The elegant tapestries felt like taunts, reminders of the gilded cage she was expected to inhabit. A life of influence and status, but also of duty and restriction. She was unable to banish the image of Kael's face, the quiet rebellion burning in his gaze as they led him away. She knew Garrick's trial would be a travesty, a predetermined charade to validate Kael's demise. He would be sacrificed as an example, a deterrent to any who dared question the Alpha's authority. She caught her reflection in the polished mirror. A wan imitation of the Luna she was destined to become. The mark on her shoulder, the sigil of her bond with Garrick, pulsed dully, an insistent reminder of her obligations. But what of her heart's compass? One of the nascent bonds she shared with Kael, a connection that defied mere responsibility. A rap at the door startled her. Torin entered, his expression severe. "The Alpha requests your presence, Elara. He wishes to finalize the arrangements for the bonding." Elara inhaled deeply, bracing herself. "Inform the Alpha I will attend him presently." Torin nodded curtly and departed, his gaze lingering on her a fraction too long. A silent caution lingering in their depths, Elara knew she could not remain a passive observer while Garrick orchestrated Kael's end. She needed to act, to engineer a way to rescue him, even if it entailed defying the Alpha. Even if it meant jeopardizing everything. She was bound to Garrick, yes, but her soul cried out for something deeper, something untamed and authentic, something that resonated with the hunter languishing in the dungeons below. She moved toward the door, her stride firm. Hesitation was a luxury she could no longer afford. The prophecy had been spoken, and she knew, with an unwavering conviction that settled in her core, that her choices would shape the destiny of her pack. She would embrace the mantle of Luna, but she would do so on her terms. And she would deliver Kael Nightshade, even if it meant her own destruction. Down in the oubliette, Kael sensed a disturbance in the atmosphere. An imperceptible shift that tingled along his skin. He couldn't decipher its meaning, but he knew Elara was approaching. And with her advent, the true game would begin. He shut his eyes, focusing his energy, preparing himself for whatever awaited him. He was ready. He had been ready for quite some time. A rebellion begins. The midday sun hammered the Silvermoon Pack gathering. Above them, banners displaying Garrick's Ironclaw emblem cracked like thunder, a jarring contrast to the storm raging within Elara. Her claiming ceremony was today, the day she'd be irrevocably bound to Garrick not just as Luna Cred, but as his life mate, branded as his forever. Ordinarily, the resinous scent of pine and earthy loam soothed her, but now it felt like a physical weight, a constant reminder of the territory anchoring her, the pack to which she'd sworn fealty, even at the expense of her heart. Anya Moonwhisper, her confidant, squeezed her hand, a small grounding gesture amidst her rising anxiety. "You look luminous, Elara," Anya murmured, her voice edged with a worry Elara couldn't brush aside. "Are you truly all right?" Elara manufactured a smile. "Just pre-wedding jitters, I imagine." But Anya's perception ran too deep for such flimsy defenses. Lysandra Swiftfoot, typically ebullient, stood apart, her expression inscrutable. Her usually bright silver eyes narrowed and dark. Since Kael's incarceration, a shadow had clung to her. Elara suspected Lysandra held Kael in high esteem, recognizing qualities Garrick either overlooked or pointedly ignored. As Garrick's voice boomed across the clearing, launching into his speech, a wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm Elara. He sermonized about unwavering strength, unquestioning loyalty, and the ruthless quelling of dissent. Each syllable seemed to tighten the noose around her spirit. This wasn't the healing community she envisioned, but a dominion built on intimidation, governed by a gauntlet. Feigning a need for fresh air, she extricated herself from the ceremony. Anya, concern etched on her face, pursued her. "Elara, this charade has to end. What's really happening?" Drawing her deeper into the dappled shade of the woods, Elara sought escape from eavesdroppers. "I can't do this, Anya. I can't chain myself to him. Not with what I know he's capable of." Anya's eyes widened, mirroring her shock. But the bond selected me, yes, Elara cut in, her voice vibrating with suppressed emotion. But does that preclude choice? Am I condemned to stand by while he eviscerates everything we cherish? Eviscerates? What are you implying? Anya whispered, fear threading through her words. Elara drew a steadying breath. He imprisoned Kael, not from tangible threat, but for truth-telling, for daring to challenge his decrees. Kael is an outsider, a hunter, Anya offered weakly. He penetrated Garrick's veneer, Anya. He perceived the dread that permeates our pack, and he voiced it. That's valor. Elara saw the internal battle duty versus doubt raging in Anya's eyes. She pressed her advantage. Garrick wants to rule through suffocation. He strives to extinguish all opposition. That is not might, Anya. That's despotism. Anya's gaze fell. Her hands nodded in front of her. What are you proposing, Elara? I propose we dismantle it. I propose resistance. The words hung between them, pregnant with consequence. Anya lifted her gaze, her eyes reflecting both trepidation and a tentative spark of rebellion. How? He is the Alpha. Not for long, Elara said, steel entering her tone. Others resonate with this disquiet. We need to seek them out, show them they are not singular. The following hour became a clandestine dance through the forest, locating those whose loyalty Elara trusted, those who had already expressed reservations about Garrick's authority. There was Bram, a young warrior whose brother had been unjustly disciplined for a piddling transgression. Silas, a seasoned hunter, a witness to Garrick's ruthlessness. Elders who pined for the tranquil, prosperous era preceding Garrick's ascent. Each exchange was a tightrope walk, a calculated investigation of allegiances. Some were paralyzed by apprehension, their dread eclipsing their discontent. But others, fueled by Elara's audaciousness, voiced their own misgivings. As twilight bled across the sky, painting it in shades of amber and violet, Elara assembled her fledgling cabal in a secluded glen. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, the weight of their decision palpable. We share a common purpose, Elara opened, her voice clear and resonant, despite the tremor in her core. Garrick is charting a ruinous course. He prioritizes dominion over accord, fear over faithfulness. Passivity is no longer an option while he corrodes our entire foundation. Bram stepped forward, resolution hardening his features. What are you advocating, Elara? He's the Alpha. We're duty-bound to obey. We're duty-bound to safeguard our own, Elara countered. And if Garrick endangers us, we are compelled to obstruct him. Silas nodded, his face grim. His ambition has become unbridled. His hunger for supremacy is insatiable. Our first priority is freeing Kael, Elara declared. He is wrongly imprisoned, held captive for nothing more than sharing his view. A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the group. They apprehended the perils, the ramifications of defying the Alpha. Yet, they recognized that inaction would condemn their pack to slow decay. Abruptly, a figure melted from the shadows, her silver eyes blazing in the fading light. It was Lysandra. I overheard your plan, she uttered, her voice low and controlled. Elara arrested her breath, unsure of Lysandra's motives. Will you betray us? Lysandra shook her head, her gaze unwavering. I've observed Garrick too closely, for too long. I've witnessed the malignancy deepening within him. I can no longer stand idly by. She paused, her eyes locking with Elara's. "I'm with you." A tidal wave of relief washed through Elara. Lysandra's allegiance was invaluable. She was among the most formidable warriors in the pack, respected and feared in equal measure. "Then let us begin," Elara responded, a spark of defiance igniting within her. "We have a hunter to liberate, and a pack to redeem." They huddled, hashing out their strategy. Lysandra possessed intimate knowledge of the prison's layout, guard rotations, and security vulnerabilities. They would strike at dawn, when the pack was slumbering, when Garrick would least anticipate it. As the first slivers of sunlight pierced the canopy, Elara led her nascent insurgency toward the prison, their hearts pounding with both fear and resolve. They were a disparate collective, unified by their shared belief in a brighter destiny for the Silvermoon Pack. They were about to challenge the Alpha, defy the ancient bond, and gamble everything for the future of their community and for the love that dared to blossom in the most perilous of conditions. This wasn't merely a rescue. This was the dawn of rebellion. Breaking chains, the gibbous moon cast elongated shadows across the training grounds as Elara, cloaked in darkness, led Lysandra and 3 other dissidents toward the holding cells. Each step was measured, the crunch of gravel underfoot amplified in the tense silence. The air hung thick with the scent of pine and the metallic tang of fear. Elara clutched the small pouch containing powdered wolfsbane, a potent disabler, her heart hammering against her ribs. Tonight, she wasn't just a healer, she was a rebel. "Remember the plan," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "Lysandra, you and Torin will create a diversion at the north gate. Draw as many guards as you can. Mara and Finn, you're with me. We get Kael." Lysandra, her face grim, nodded. "Be careful, Elara. Garrick's wolves are loyal, and Torin Stonehand is always suspicious." Her hand rested briefly on the hilt of her sword, a silent promise of protection. With a final, shared glance, they split up, melting into the shadows. Elara, Mara, and Finn crept along the perimeter of the holding cells, the rough-hewn stone cold against their fingertips. The cells were located beneath the main pack house, damp and reeking of despair. The only light came from a flickering torch near the entrance, guarded by 2 sentries. Elara signaled to Mara and Finn. Finn, the youngest of the group but surprisingly strong, moved forward, feigning drunkenness. He stumbled and slurred, bumping into one of the guards. "Oi! Watch where you're going, pup!" The guard snarled, shoving Finn roughly. As the guard's attention was diverted, Elara moved with swift precision. She flung a handful of wolfsbane powder into the face of the other guard, who gasped, clutching his eyes as the powder burned. He staggered back, blinded and disoriented. Before he could raise an alarm, Elara struck him with the flat of her hand, knocking him unconscious. Mara, nimble and quick, snatched the keys from the fallen guard's belt. "Let's go," she hissed, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They hurried down the narrow stone steps leading to the cells. The air grew colder and heavier, the stench of mildew and hopelessness almost suffocating. Elara fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking. The first few keys were wrong, the metallic clicks echoing in the confined space. Finally, she found the right one and shoved it into the lock of Kael's cell. The heavy iron door creaked open, revealing Kael. He stood in the darkness, his eyes gleaming like a predator's. His wrists were raw and chafed from the shackles, his face bruised, but his spirit remained unbroken. He looked at Elara, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice a low growl. "We had to be careful," Elara replied, her voice tight. Are you all right? Kael ignored her question. Garrick will be expecting this. He won't make it easy. That's why we're leaving now. Elara grabbed his arm, urging him forward. We need to get you out of here. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, a shout echoed from above. Intruders! The hunter is escaping! Garrick's voice, amplified by the stone walls, sent a chill down Elara's spine. Their diversion had failed, or worse, had been discovered. They know, Mara whispered, her face pale. We have to hurry. They reached the end of the tunnel, which opened into a small, enclosed courtyard. Standing between them and freedom were 4 of Garrick's most loyal guards, led by Torin Stonehand. Torin's grim face was illuminated by the moonlight, his eyes narrowed with suspicion and anger. Elara, Torin said, his voice heavy with disappointment. What is the meaning of this? Are you betraying your Alpha? Elara stepped forward, her chin held high. I am not betraying anyone, Torin. I am choosing what is right, and you think freeing a murderer is right. Torin spat, gesturing towards Kael. He deserves to die. He deserves a fair trial. Elara countered. Something Garrick was never going to give him. Torin laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You've been blinded by him, Elara. He's twisted your mind. My mind is clear, Torin. More clear than it's ever been. Elara reached into her cloak and pulled out a small silver dagger. It wasn't a weapon she was skilled with, but it would have to do. Stand aside, Torin, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. I don't want to hurt you. You leave me no choice, Torin growled, drawing his own sword. The other guards followed suit, their faces grim. Kael stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the guards. This is between me and them, Elara. Stay back. No, Elara said, her voice firm. We're in this together. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Kael, despite his weakened state, fought with a ferocity that surprised Elara. He moved with a fluid grace, dodging blows and disarming opponents with brutal efficiency. Mara and Finn fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Elara, knowing she couldn't match the guard's strength, relied on her speed and agility. She darted around the courtyard, using her knowledge of pressure points and nerve clusters to disable her opponents. She managed to disarm one guard, sending his sword clattering to the ground. Another lunged at her, but she sidestepped him and kicked out his legs, sending him sprawling. Torin, seeing his men falter, roared with anger and charged at Elara. His sword flashed in the moonlight, a deadly arc aimed at her heart. Elara braced herself for the impact, knowing she couldn't dodge it in time. Suddenly Kael appeared beside her, deflecting Torin's blow with his own makeshift weapon, a sharpened piece of metal he'd found in his cell. The force of the impact sent sparks flying, the clang of metal echoing through the courtyard. Get out of here, Elara, Kael shouted, his eyes blazing. I'll hold them off. Elara hesitated, torn between her desire to fight alongside him and her knowledge that they needed to escape. She glanced at Mara and Finn, who was struggling to stay on their feet. She knew that Kael was right. Their only chance was to flee. Let's go, she shouted, grabbing Mara and Finn by the arms. We'll meet at the old oak. With a final lingering look at Kael, Elara turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness beyond the courtyard. Behind her, she could hear the clash of steel and the snarls of wolves, the sounds of a battle she couldn't afford to stay and fight. Her heart ached with guilt and fear, but she knew that she had made the right choice. For now, at least, they were free. But for how long? And at what cost? A new dawn, a palpable tension thrummed through the Silvermoon Pack's territory, the very air buzzing with unease. Elara confronted Garrick, the defiant colors of dawn mirroring the inner turmoil consuming her. "There's another way, Garrick," she urged, her voice carrying across the training grounds. "We can forge a future where strength blossoms from empathy, not fear." A harsh laugh, completely devoid of mirth, was Garrick's reply. "Empathy? You dare speak of empathy after your betrayal, after choosing a human?" The slur dripped with venom, his eyes burning with possessive rage. "You were destined, Elara. Destined to be Luna, to reign beside me, to lead this pack to glory. You were to bear my children, securing our lineage." "Destined," Elara retorted, her voice rising to meet his. "Or shackled. You cling to tradition, Garrick, as if it were the sole thing preventing our collapse. But it's stifling us. It's blinding you to the world beyond our borders, to the myriad possibilities." She advanced, hand outstretched. "Let me show you what we might become." He snarled, his features shifting, becoming more wolfish with anger. "Show me? You've already revealed your weakness, Elara. You've displayed stark disloyalty." With a bellow he surged forward, claws extended, intent on violence. But before he could reach her, a figure intervened, a shadow moving with impossible speed. Kael. His response to Garrick's attack was immediate, a study in controlled force. The impact of their bodies echoed across the clearing, a percussive symphony of raw power and discipline. "Kael, don't!" Elara cried, her words swallowed by the escalating conflict. She watched, heart hammering, as they exchanged blows, each strike weighted with their contrasting ideals. "This is between us, Hunter," Garrick grated, shoving Kael back. "Stay out of it." Kael responded with a mirthless grin. "It ceased being just between you the moment you embraced tyrannical rule, Alpha." He straightened, his gaze meeting Elara's. "This concerns the Pack's very destiny, Elara, and whether they'll be governed by oppression or fidelity." A realization solidified within Elara. She could no longer remain a bystander. She channeled her inner power, the healing energy within her now edged with steel. She wouldn't mend Garrick, but shield those he imperiled. She stepped forward, aligning herself with Kael. "I won't allow you to destroy everything," she declared, her voice imbued with newfound conviction. "This pack deserves better. This world warrants better." The ensuing struggle was a brutal tempest. Garrick, driven by rage and injured pride, fought with the unrestrained fury of a trapped animal. But Elara and Kael presented a unified front, their abilities intertwined, their determination unbreakable. Elara employed her healing gifts defensively, diverting Garrick's assaults and amplifying Kael's strength. Kael, in turn, fought with a focused intensity that kept Garrick perpetually at bay. Eventually, through their combined effort, they managed to disarm Garrick, leaving him vanquished and breathless. He lay on the ground, struggling for air, disbelief clouding his eyes. "It's finished, Garrick," Elara said, her tone tinged with melancholy. "This style of leadership is no longer viable." A council was established, comprised of delegates from both the Werewolf Pack and the human settlements. The alliance was fragile, predicated on tentative trust, but it was a beginning. Elara and Kael labored relentlessly, arbitrating disputes, addressing grievances, striving to bridge the chasm dividing their worlds. Their efforts were not unopposed. Rorik Shadowclaw, a renegade werewolf consumed by antipathy towards humans, arose as a new menace. He amassed a following of like-minded individuals, exploiting fear and bias, seeking to ignite a war between the species. "They will never accept us," Rurik rasped, his voice a conduit of hate. "They will always perceive us as monsters. Our only guarantee of survival lies in their eradication." Elara and Kael understood that he had to be stopped before he could incite widespread carnage. They tracked him to a secluded forest, where he was poised to unleash an assault on a nearby human village. Confrontation was unavoidable. Rurik and his adherents were a formidable force, fueled by hatred and desperation. But Elara and Kael were far from alone. They had the backing of the council, the allegiance of those who shared their vision of peace. The combat was ferocious and visceral. Werewolves and humans stood shoulder to shoulder, united against a shared adversary. Elara, employing her healing talents, tended to the injured, while Kael, with his exceptional combat prowess, spearheaded the offensive against Rurik. Ultimately, Elara faced Rurik, her gaze unwavering. "This loathing will consume you, Rurik," she declared, her voice resonating with sorrow. "It's not too late to choose a different path," Rurik snarled, his eyes alight with madness. "There is no other path," he hissed, lunging for her. But Elara stood ready. She met his attack head-on, her own power surging to the surface. She fought with newfound strength, fueled by her love for Kael and her dedication to a peaceful resolution. With a final surge, she managed to disarm Rurik, exposing him. She could have ended his life, but she refrained. Instead, she extended her hand, offering him surrender. Rurik stared, his eyes filled with disbelief. He registered the genuine empathy on her face, the unwavering faith in a brighter future. For a fleeting moment, he hesitated, the poison within him vying with a spark of hope. Yet, the darkness ultimately prevailed. He threw himself at Elara, claws bared. Kael, discerning the peril, intervened, knocking Rurik off balance. Before he could recover, Kael subdued him, neutralizing the threat. With Rurik's defeat, the remaining rogue werewolves scattered, their rebellion quelled. The imminent war was averted, and the precarious peace endured. As calm returned, Elara and Kael stood together, their eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun dipped below the skyline, painting the heavens with hues of gold and crimson, a symbol of their enduring bond and their shared commitment to a future of concord and understanding between werewolves and humans. They had weathered the storms, surmounted obstacles, and emerged more resilient together. "We succeeded," Elara breathed, awestruck. "We actually succeeded." Kael smiled, a rare and heartfelt expression. "We did," he affirmed, reaching for her hand. "And this is just the dawn." They remained, hand in hand, bathed in the sun's fading glow, embracing their destinies as leaders, heralding an age of accord, an era where affection and comprehension triumphed over fear and animosity. The Alpha and the Hunter, united by a love that transcended expectations, forever rewriting the annals of their world.